Good afternoon, folks. Chief Meteorologist Nick Lilia here in the Severe Weather Forecast Center, sitting back in behind the studio and taking a look at our severe weather chances as we move through the day on Monday and into Tuesday, and the chance that we see some snow here across the Pine Belt. I know a lot of people are actually more interested in the snow than the severe weather, even though the severe weather is probably a bigger threat than the snow will ever be down here. But if you stick with me through learning something about our severe weather threat, I will pay you with the chance that we do see some snow down here, which unfortunately, as it looks right now, isn't that great. So we'll start off looking at, like I always like to do, the temperatures. And this is for, as we head through Tuesday morning at 7 o'clock in the morning. I think this is going to be the peak time that we see the opportunity for showers and thunderstorms that could turn severe. I think it's going to be between about 7 a.m. on Tuesday and about 1 o'clock or so in the afternoon before the cold front comes barreling through and we start to cool things down. Now, given that it's only Thursday, it's still a long way away, so things can change, so you're going to want to keep an eye to the forecast. But like I always like to do, we'll take a look at the 300 millibar winds, and you can see a big dip in the old jet down here, and then it pushes off to the east. Notice, though, what we like to see around here, again, I always like to point this out, the isobars, we like to see these guys spreading apart as they go upstream. And from here to here, there's not a terrible amount of spreading in the atmosphere over the top of us, though there is a fair amount of wind back out of the west. So we don't have that spreading, and usually what we like to see is these lines that come down and then shoot off to the north, and we kind of like to see them kind of do this and then kind of like that, and we definitely don't have that either. Okay. But what are we looking at in terms of a dew point? Down at about 850 millibars or so. Again, that's about 2,000 feet off the ground or so. This is the area we like to look for to have a lot of moisture, to transport that moisture aloft to make these showers and thunderstorms strong or severe. And you see that we do have the greens and kind of the greenish yellows down off to the south, and that would translate to anywhere between about a 8 degree to about a 13 degree or so dew point. And again, that's Celsius, this isn't Fahrenheit, so that translates to 50s and 60s, so to speak. I don't think we'll have any 70 degree dew points as we move through the morning on Tuesday. But also take a look at the wind barbs, not necessarily coming out of the south and southeast, but coming out of kind of the west and southwest, and that's something to pay close attention to. Because really, at this point in time, with the way the ocean temperatures are and everything, and with the way things are setting up in the Gulf, really you'd want the wind to be coming from kind of the south and southeast to really get some good moisture in here, and not necessarily from the south and west, which is why our dew points aren't necessarily too high, between 8 and 13 degrees C, rather than coming in between 12 and 16 degrees Celsius or so. Now we take it over vertical velocity, and we just got a whole lot of nothing. Big old goose egg sitting on top of us. We do have some just off, as it looks right now, to our east. And again, things can change over the next couple of days, but not exactly a vigorous setup with a whole lot of vertical transport within the atmosphere. In terms of instability, not much there either in the morning. You're 750 joules per kilogram all the way down into the Gulf. Though, one thing to note, with winds coming out of the south and west, coming out of the area with the most instability, there's some argument that could be made as we move through the mid-morning hours that we might be able to transport a little bit of this instability toward us. But as it looks right now, things just aren't in place as we move through the morning and into the early afternoon. Lifted indices sitting around zero as well. So we got to look at shear and see if there's enough spin in the atmosphere to overcome the lack of instability, the lack of vertical transport. And right now, with shear values up over 45 knots, you could say that we've got enough shear to give us the opportunity for some severe weather, given we're kind of lacking in instability, lacking in vertical velocity, and our 850 millibar dew points are only hanging out at about 10 degrees or so. The case could be made that we may be have just enough to get a couple severe storms, which is why right now we're saying that there's the possibility for a couple of severe storms, but right now widespread severe weather isn't anticipated. I do want to bring up the 500 millibar temperature map really quickly. I haven't had a chance to look at this yet, but it looks like we're sitting in the lightish blue area, which is anywhere between about 10 and 15 degrees below zero. And again, we're talking Celsius, which gives you a lapse rate that's average at best in terms of severe weather, given the temperature that we're going to be at about 850 millibars or so. We'll clear that out, which is down in kind of the 8 to 10 degree range or so. So you're going from about 10 degrees to about negative 10 degrees or so. Not terribly impressive. Okay, so the concern is there, but right now, as it looks, we're not terribly concerned about the opportunity for any severe weather. I think we'll probably see 2 to 3 severe storms and a line of storms that's probably going to be pretty strong with some pretty good straight line winds. As if you take a look through the column, we're going to do this real quick. If you take a look through the column, see how the barbs here out of the southwest, and they're going at about, what was that, 50, 65 knots or so. And then you move down, and at 850 millibars, we're still looking at a nice southwest wind. We can take this over. Let's see, where's my, here we go. And then we're all the way down here at 850 again. Let's go down to the surface. And we'll look at the winds down at the surface really quickly, guys. And see if we can't translate that to winds at the surface coming out of the south and west. So you've got winds that are all coming from the same direction, stacked on top of each other. There's no doubt that in a couple of those storms that are able to pull the wind down from aloft, you're probably going to get some pretty strong winds. One thing to note, though, that the surface wind at, this will be on the 17th at 12Z, already has our surface wind back around to the northwest. I don't necessarily buy that. I think the front's going to hold off for a little bit longer. But nevertheless, we'll talk about that. Here we go, 12Z. Or I should say 0Z on the 18th. So this is into the afternoon on Tuesday, and we have a stout north wind, which is going to translate to the introduction to some pretty chilly air across the area as we move through the day on Wednesday. But before I go any further, I don't know that we'll get any snow all the way down to the surface, and this is why. Here's the payoff. I know everyone's been waiting for this. Okay, in order to make snow, you've got to really, in order to make a good snowflake, you got to get to below this line right here. You've got to get your temperature line below 10 degrees, and again, this is Celsius aloft. Now, this is where you can start to build snowflakes, and you really want that area to be saturated with moisture so you can make as many snowflakes as possible. And you do that by getting this green line, which is the dew point line, real close to that red line. We don't necessarily have that. Now, it's not terribly far away, especially down here at about 10 degrees below zero or so. But it's not exactly like it is a little further down in the atmosphere where it's piled right on top of it. So we're not incredibly saturated in this area right here, which is really what we're looking for if we want to build a snowflake. But let's say, for example, we can. For whatever reason, right at about 10 degrees or so, we've got just enough moisture that we can build a couple of snowflakes, and they're going to start falling toward the surface. That's great. It's great news for all the kids around here. We're building snowflakes aloft, and they're starting to drift down toward the surface as we head into the overnight hours, Tuesday and into Wednesday morning, which means, hey kids, hooray, there is an opportunity that you might see some snowflakes in the morning. Oh, hold on though. Hold on. They've got to get through a layer of air as they're falling that's actually going to be above freezing. See this zero mark right here? And again, like I always say with these QTs, the lines are really weird, but they do that so that everything makes sense. There's your 10 degrees below zero line. There's your 20 degrees below zero line. And again, this is just a graph. It's just kind of sideways. And here is your 0 degrees Celsius line. That's very important because that's where water freezes. So even if you make a snowflake up here and you want it to fall down to the surface, it's falling into air that is above freezing for a pretty good section of the atmosphere. We're talking about almost 4,000 feet. And snowflakes don't exactly fall very quickly. So they'll most likely melt now. At the same time, this area of the atmosphere just above the ground is back below freezing again. So we're taking a snowflake, it's falling, then it's melting, falling as rain, and then has the opportunity to refreeze above the ground before it falls back to the ground. And notice at ground level where that red line is, that's on the other side of that zero line, which means above freezing. So at the very most, I think we'll likely see some sleet pellets mixing in with mostly rain late Tuesday and into Wednesday morning if we are to see any wintry precip. Because as we move forward in time, sure, we'll get colder as we head into Wednesday morning, but notice that where we're making the snowflakes, again, there's your 10-degree line, there's your 20-degree line right there. You've got to get this red line above the other red line, so you're looking kind of in this area right here. It is so dry in here that we're not going to be able to make any more snowflakes by the time that the atmosphere is below freezing from top all the way down to the surface. And really, as we head forward in time a little bit further, now this is moving into Wednesday morning, Wednesday mid-morning. Look how dry. We've got so much space in here. Very dry aloft. We're not going to be getting any moisture out of the clouds. And again, this is just one model. This is just the GFS right now. And that is based on a point which is about, I want to say, just off to the west of Wiggins or so. These are all gridded points. Unfortunately, we can't grid one right on top of your individual neighborhood. But I want to point something else out. We're going to take a look just up the road. Now, this is a point that's just south of Meridian. And here we are Tuesday night and into Wednesday morning. Notice how saturated we are up here. See, this is that 10-degree below zero line again, 20-degree below zero line again. This is where we're making snowflakes, and that green line right on top of that red line. We're most likely making snowflakes up there. And then they're falling down, but notice as they fall down, here's that 0 Celsius line. Not only are they above freezing all the way down at the surface, but they're above freezing from about, that's about 3,000 meters, so about 9,000 feet up, all the way down to the surface, you're above freezing. So sure, you're making plenty of snowflakes up there, but unfortunately, they're melting and then going all the way down to the ground, melted. We'll move forward in time, another about 6 hours or so. Here we go into the morning on Wednesday. You're still making snowflakes. Great. Now it looks like we're now cooler. We're now below freezing all the way down to the ground. So up by Meridian, they may run into a situation where for a very short window of time, not only are they being able to make the snowflakes aloft, but they can travel all the way down to the surface without melting. That said, look at the temperature at the surface. You're sitting right at the freezing mark. So the chances that they see snow for an extended period of time, not great, but it's still there. But take a look at what happens as we move through the morning. You start drying things out. So as the as the cold air filters in, it dries out the atmosphere, which is why the window for snowfall or wintry precipitation is so small across the area. And again, that's up toward Meridian, and again, earlier we were looking down toward Wiggins. Now, most of us fall in between those 2 points, so things get really tricky for most of the area in terms of the opportunity for any wintry precipitation. But right now, I've got a sneaking suspicion that A, this air is not going to be quite as cold as advertised by a lot of the computer weather models, because over the last about 2 weeks or so, it continues to say, here comes some very, very cold air. And recall, we haven't been too terribly cold. A couple of days out, oh, here comes the freezing air, here comes the 20s. We prepare for it, and then we get down into the 30s. We've got afternoon highs that are forecast to be in the 40s from our models. We'll say the 50s as the forecast because all of us don't necessarily think it's going to get too cold, and then we end up closer to 60. So that's another thing to kind of keep in mind as we move through the next couple of days. I still think that a couple of sleet pellets at best. Now things could change over the next couple of days, and we will watch it very closely, but that's the forecast as it sits right now. as we look through the next couple of days. So all you kids that are really looking forward, or parents, that are really looking forward to an opportunity for a snow day, unfortunately, as it sits right now, I don't think you're going to get one on Wednesday. I don't think we're going to see any snowflakes. You may see some farther off to the north, but I think the farther you go off to the south, the more likely you'll see just sleet pellets at the very best. And for most of us, it'll likely just be a cold rain. Sorry, guys. I know you're really looking forward to some snow. But that's the breakdown as it looks right now, not only for severe weather, but also the opportunity for a couple of snowflakes as we move through Monday into Tuesday and Wednesday.